So today I am giving my last part, already part number 8 of long-term review or course of talks with the general name of Phase of Fundamental Science, and I started it already a year ago from ancient Greece, from Pythagoras and Plato and Aristotle. Now I am coming to situation after World War II, of the post-revolution, post-scientific revolution time. And I called this section of my course as the loss of philosophy, and I will try to show why it seems to me a proper name for the contemporary situation, contemporary relation between fundamental science and its long-term faith, which apparently is not, almost is not a faith anymore, or lost significant part of it. I will start from one of the very prominent scientists, please come, from the very prominent scientist of the period of the second part of last century, great theoretician, great teacher, very charismatic person, very artistic person, and I think it's impossible do not love him. I think many of us, if not all, fell in love with his course of physics, which is I think poetry in physics, Feynman lectures. And I'd like to show his philosophical views and his position with the respect of the point which I have in mind, fundamental science. I will start from citation from him, from his paper I make, The Character of Physical Law, 1965. To summarize, I would use the words of Jeans, who said that the great architect seems to be a mathematician, in quotes. To those who do not know mathematics, it is difficult to get across a real feeling as to the beauty, the deepest beauty of nature. Charles Percy Snow talked about two cultures, humanitarian and scientific. I really think that those two cultures separate people who have and people who have not had this experience of understanding mathematics well enough to appreciate nature once. This, you see here, I think, strong expression of that traditional, old, already 1,000 years, many thousand, or more than 1,000 years old Pythagorean faith in this inner beauty of nature expressed through perfect mathematical forms. He is enthusiastically saying about this. It's not only in this place, of course. There are many quotations of Richard Feynman where he expressed very poetically, actually, very enthusiastically, his belief in this inner beauty of nature, which requires mathematical skills to see. So for humanitarian people who do not have these skills, it's impossible. And that's the point where he sees the point of separation, misunderstanding of two cultures, scientific culture and humanitarian culture. Charles Percy Snow. At the same time, he characterized himself as an atheist. He stressed that he is not agnostic. He stressed that, no, I am not agnostic, I am atheist. Agnostic would be too weak to me. So, he enthusiastically stressed his belief in unity and mathematical elegance of laws of nature, as a language of nature itself, as he put it, as the most fundamental property of nature itself, yes. So he had two very valuable for him points of his credo, worldview. Atheism was also very valuable for him. He stressed it and he pointed it many times. And this belief in that laws of nature are described by beautiful equations, that nature has a beautiful language of mathematics. He never asked if his atheism is compatible with his enthusiastic faith in mathematical beauty of the physical laws. Never, at least as far as I know. I read, I think, everything what was available just to make sure that I am not wrong claiming this. But every one of you may correct me if you know or keep it in mind. I tried my best to find any question of Richard Feynman. Is his atheism and the belief, the Pythagorean belief in the inner beauty of mathematical law, are they compatible with each other or not? Never. Contrary to the fathers of scientific revolution, he had never reflected on that fundamental question of compatibility. For fathers of scientific revolution, it was a very important point, essentially for all of them. I am not saying about Descartes or Galileo, nothing to say about them. Of course, it was a very core of their worldview, but also for fathers of scientific revolution, like Einstein or Niels Bohr or Dirac. And that shows his aphilosophical set of mind, I would say, because he did not care how his different credos, beliefs, are compatible or not with each other. He did not question this, never cared. And this is, for me, I think it is a very clear signature of a philosophical set of mind of Richard Feynman. His loss of that he already belonged to first generation, I would say, great physicists of the epoch where philosophy, connection between big physics and philosophy was lost. Another big figure who also belonged to this great physicist of epoch of the loss of philosophy is Steven Weinberg. I will suggest you a few citations of his book of Facing Up, 2001. He's asking the question, why should the philosophy of science not be of more help to scientists? So he's saying that he doesn't see any help of philosophy of science to science, and he's asking why? Why there is no help? I'd like to put your attention that this sort of question is simply impossible to imagine for fathers of scientific revolution. Einstein, Bohr, Heisenberg, Pauli. I cannot imagine. It's just impossible. They were themselves philosophers of science and philosophers in general, and their way of cognition was both philosophical and scientific. It was actually something united in itself, and science and philosophy was sides for their great efforts in cognition of being. So that sort of question already shows that there is a split, that the philosophy is lost, and great physicist is looking on philosophy and asking himself, what is the use of that? This question already shows the loss of philosophy. One more citation from Weinberg. We learn about the philosophy of science by doing science, not the other way around. Again, it's impossible to imagine this sort of statement from in the mouth of fathers of science. Doing science is to be inside scientific research, to be inside. But philosophy is reflection on what you are doing. Philosophy is asking what is already implied in what you are doing. What is the meaning of this? What is the value of this? Why this loss of nature, not other? This is a question of philosophy. And doing science, by default, you don't know the answer of this question. It requires a special effort. And also for fathers of science, fathers of scientific revolution, philosophy was not something like favorite hobby. By no means. It was important part of their cognition, also helping them to answer their question, how to build new science. One more citation. The philosophy of science is just about as useful to scientists as ornithology is to birds. This is a wonderful citation, one of my favorite. Now, about birds, actually, Lev reminded me that Plato wrote something very interesting about creation of the race of birds. Plato, by the way, he suggested the first theory of evolution. Well, it was rather anti-evolution than evolution. In the dialogue Timaeus, he wrote how all the species were created as a way of degeneration, actually. First, the very powerful humans were created by gods, and then souls, after this metempsychosis, due to sort of entropy, they degenerated and then appeared species, lower and lower species. So birds was, by the way, rather high. They immediately appeared from some sort of humans. What sort of humans? Now let me give you citation. But the race of birds was created out of innocent, light-minded men, who, although their minds were directed toward heaven, imagined in their simplicity that the clearest demonstration of the things above was to be obtained by sight. These were, isn't it scientific approach? These were transformed into birds, and they grew feathers instead of hair. Plato Timaeus. I think it is wonderful commentary to Weinberg observation that the philosophy of science is just about as useful to scientists as ornithology is to birds. That sort of birds singing their songs and without any reflection. Shut up and calculate. This is the spirit of this formula, which assigned sometimes to Richard Feynman, sometimes to Weinberg, or at least they share this approach. And I think it's very clear. Now I'd like to give you a rather big citation from Lee Smolin. You know, this is a very visible scientist and also philosopher of science. And he actually gave a talk here in Fermilab in colloquium, I believe, like 5 years ago. Maybe you remember, Mike. No, he visited us about 5 years ago and gave talk colloquium. And this is his book, Trouble with Physics, of 2006. And I'd like to suggest citation which I think supporting what I am saying, or maybe given in a better way. The atmosphere in Harvard, end of 70s, was not philosophical. It was harsh and aggressive, dominated by people who were brash, cocky, confident, and in some cases insulting to people who disagreed with them. The spirit was pragmatic. Shut up and calculate was the mantra. This style is pragmatic and hard-nosed and favors virtuosity in calculating over reflection on hard conceptual problems. This is profoundly different from the way that Albert Einstein, Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, Erwin Schrödinger, and the other early 20th century revolutionaries did science. Their work arose from deep thought on the most basic questions surrounding space, time, and matter, and they saw what they did as part of a broader philosophical tradition in which they were at home. I think this is very important. I fully agree. In the approach to particle physics, developed and taught by Richard Feynman, Freeman Dyson, and others, reflection on foundational problems had no place in research. This freed them from the debates over the meaning of quantum physics that their elders were embroiled in and led to 30 years of dramatic progress. This is as it should be. Different styles of research are needed to solve different kinds of problems. Working out the applications of established frameworks requires very different kinds of thinking and thinkers than inventing those frameworks in the first place. However, as I will argue in detail in the pages to come, the lesson of the last 30 years, 40 already, is that the problems we are up against today cannot be solved by this pragmatic way of doing science. I think it is very important observation of science, I would say. Now I'd like to remind you what is the Pythagorean creed. All this my course of Face of Fundamental Science is about what is I call Pythagoreanism. It is not only me, it is more or less accepted term for philosophers of science. And it actually cannot be distinguished with Platonism or objective idealism. Essentially, it is the same. So I'd like to remind you main point of Pythagorean creed, as in my words, of course. Fundamental physics was indeed born and driven by the cosmic religious feeling, Einstein. Rational verbalization of this Pythagorean phase could be formulated as the following creed. First, behind the phenomena, there is a beautiful logos structure in the world. So I'm using non-scientific terms like beautiful, because this is creed, this is point of belief, and this is not theory, not a formal theory. Logos is unified. This is logos, sometimes it's called. Logos is unified. It shows the mind of God, who is one. Man's mind is in similarity to the mind, this transcendental mind. Therefore, the divine laws are discoverable. That is why. That is why they are perfect, because they are coming from the absolute perfect mind, and the laws are perfect, and they are discoverable because human mind is consubstantial. Use this theological word, consubstantial to the divine. The world is contingent, so experiments are required. Contingent means that this divine mind who created this world was not forced to do from some atemporal reason to do the world only this, in this and only this way. He was free to build one world or another world. And to see the law of nature is not sufficient to be deeply in reason. You should observe. And this was important point of Galileo, by the way. Human cognition of the grand design is a part of our loftiest endeavor, of our ascending to God, who is the source of truth and beauty. This is very important ethical statement, the values. Why scientific research is so valuable? Because of this. This coherent phase combines theology, ontology, metaphysics, anthropology, and ethics, showing the scientific cognition as the noblest way of eternal value. This phase unifies ancient Greek, Christian, and deist fathers of science. And now I am going to suggest a brief list of biggest figures of scientific cognition from ancient time and to almost now, and to show unbelievably all of them are Platonics. All of them expressing sometimes differently, but essentially the same, this Pythagorean creed, they all share it. Pythagoras, first, he enunciated communion with God through theorein, or contemplate. This is a Greek verb, theorein. He also coined the word cosmos, which is order and beauty together in Greek. He is father of theory per se. He had a strong belief that sometimes is expressed that in the core of being there is number. What is number? It is integer number for him, and integer number is a maybe perfect representative of perfect thought, very not approximate, but you cannot add even a little. 2 plus 2 is 4 exactly and atemporally forever. Nothing can happen with 2 plus 2. So, and arithmetics is from ancient time and up to now is extremely, or number theory sometimes it's called, it is extremely important source of mathematical thought, especially for mathematicians with high value of aesthetics. And this is Pythagorean. Democritus. Sometimes Democritus is, in some books of history of science, he is characterized as ancient materialist. It's not true, actually. He is paradoxical thinker. If you will read citations, fragments of Democritus, you will see that he believed in benevolent gods, and he wrote directly that whatever is good is coming from gods. And he also believed in determinism of atoms and void. How he made this compatible, we do not know. because not so much fragments from Democritus came to us, but in fragments of Democritus, you will find both. So he would better characterize as paradoxical thinker, maybe like Niels Bohr, or Niels Bohr like Democritus in this respect. Greeks actually valued paradoxes. And Democritus in those fragments, he stressed that he valued paradoxes. He sometimes openly paradoxical. He distinguished genuine theoretic and obscure sensory knowledge. So also in this respect, he was Pythagorean. Plato, he developed Pythagorean teaching about objective reason, transcendental God, similarity of human mind to divine, and human salvation by cognition. It's also important. Human salvation by cognition, important point of Pythagorean faith. Then Euclid, Archimedes, Aristotle, Epicurus, they were all ancient Platonic. Some of them should be maybe better characterized like deists, Epicurus, for instance, because Epicurus stressed that there is nothing personal between gods and humans. So gods do not care about us. They are too far from us. We are too little, not so much interested. But nevertheless, they believed that divine mind is a source of everything, especially Aristotle very clearly. Then I am coming to Renaissance and 17th century, Copernicus, Kepler, Galilei, Descartes, Newton, Christians, Platonics. Euler, Cauchy, devoted Christians, Platonics. Faraday, Maxwell, Christian, Platonics, also devoted. They were preaching in their churches, by the way, Michael Faraday and James Clerk Maxwell. Leibniz, Laplace, D'Alembert, Gauss, Boltzmann, deists. Not a single, know that there is not a single skeptic, Kantian, materialist. Fathers of scientific revolution, all of them again Platonic with different tastes. Most of them were deists, not theists. Let me remind those of you maybe who not remember the difference between deism and theism. Is that deists, they believe in sort of a temporal mathematical mind which set the universe once and forever and governed by perfect mathematical laws. And for deists, any idea of personal contact with God was a sort of absurdic. They refuted it. For theists, Christianity, Judaism, for instance, theistic religions, they believe that there is a personal contact with God, and it's very important. So this is the difference. I will tell more about deism a bit later. So almost all of them, with a few exceptions, fathers of scientific revolution, they were deists, like Spinoza, for instance. So they believe that there's a perfect sort of mathematical mind which sets the universe once forever, and the human mind is consubstantial to this divine. That's why the world is comprehensible, laws are discoverable. Henri Poincaré, Max Planck, David Hilbert, Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein stressed that he is Spinoza, sort of deism. Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg. Heisenberg, by the way, believed in a personal contact with God. He was not deist. He was theist. Wolfgang Pauli, Erwin Schrödinger. Schrödinger was shared essentially Vedanta philosophy, which in its core not that different, I think, at least for him, from Spinozian philosophy. Primacy of divine consciousness. And human consciousness and divine consciousness is the same. And this is the most fundamental substance, divine consciousness. More fundamental than matter or even forms. Paul Dirac, Marxist before World War II, Platonic after. Member of the Pontiff Academy. And those of you who had the pleasure to, there was a talk about Paul Dirac here in our colloquium. Mike had the signature of the author. The Strangest Man, there is a book about Paul Dirac, wonderful book, by the way. And it was stressed that Dirac started his life as anti-philosophical and anti-religious, and finished his life as very much philosophical and in a sense, religious speaker. Kurt Gödel, Leibnizian, deist, believed in afterlife. John von Neumann, there probably is God, citation from him. Roman Catholic at the end of his life. he accepted Roman Catholicism. So you see that I mentioned, I think I did not miss any figure who could be compared with those, and no skeptic, no materialist, no atheist, no Kantian, all Platonics. Deists, theists, there is a difference, but all of them believed in the eternal mind, perfect mind, which is the ultimate source of everything existent, and similarity of human mind to the divine. Okay, so this. Now I'd like to ask a question and to discuss the answer. What is the criterion of truth for philosophy? For science, we all know what is criterion of truth. Well, agreement with experiment, and as Einstein and Dirac stressed, mathematical beauty. Theory also must be mathematically beautiful. Einstein stressed it very much, and I don't think that we are going to argue with this. But what is the criterion of truth for philosophy? I think there is nothing better than what we may read in Gospels. By their fruits you shall know them. The fruit, philosophy, is not something which you are just enjoying yourself, imagining one or another worldview. Philosophy is suggesting you really meanings and what is the world, and it's deep and if accepted as it should be accepted, it is deep and important part of your personality, and your life depends very much on the philosophy which you are sharing, on your philosophy. It is yours, maybe more than something else. And what is the truth of one or another philosophy? Of course, philosophies are different. There are many worldviews, ethical teachings. What is the truth? I don't think that we have anything better than this. By their fruits you shall know them. Of course, this is not that simple to see what is the fruit of one or another philosophy. It requires philosophical effort to distinguish what is the fruit of what. But I think that all my course actually had a purpose to show that fundamental science is a fruit of Pythagorean philosophy. And I just briefly listed what is Pythagorean philosophy. And again, names, fathers of science, all of them are Pythagorean. So fundamental science is the main fruit of the Pythagorean faith, which nurtured science, gave birth to science, and nurtured it through centuries, through millenniums. Science.
Your first statement, truth of faith is to be known by its fruits. Could you expand on that? What do you mean by its fruits exactly? Apart from what you're saying, science is a fruit, but
philosophy determines the consequences. Philosophy is telling you what matters and why, what does not matter and why. Values. Values are coined by philosophy, by philosophers. And values is what determines our life. And what happens with us in our life is determined by our values. So from this point of view, whatever happens is ultimately is defined by one or another philosophical teaching, one or another ethics, one or another metaphysics, because ethics and metaphysics are strongly related to each other. Ethics is rooted by metaphysics and fed by it. There is a strong connection between them. So, for instance, Marxist philosophy. Marxist philosophy, I will refer to a wonderful book of Friedrich von Hayek, Counter-Revolution of Science and Road to Freedom. These two books, where he shows how Marxist philosophy rooted from the cult of reason, from the dominant teachings in Paris Academy at the end of 18th century. I'm recommending you these books of this Nobel Prizer and one of the great thinkers of the last century, Friedrich von Hayek, who, by the way, was a professor in his time of Chicago University, and started his and was born in Austria.
What I'm thinking, I mean, maybe you don't mean this, but I can consider Christianity as a faith, Hinduism as a faith, not the same, not compatible, but they can't both be true then, and yet they both have fruits that you would say.
And the fruits are different. How different they are is a theme of a big discussion. Maybe we will come back to this. So But the question is very good, but I cannot go into details.
I have to leave now.
Oh, it's a pity, Mike.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, we will put it on the web. So, truth of faith is known by its fruits, and science is a fruit of Pythagorean faith. This is maybe the main conclusion of all my talk, these 8 parts. So, science with its cosmic scale, 10 to the 45, with up to 12, 14 digits of accuracy of fundamental laws of nature, with its tremendous role in history, is an unbelievably impressive fruit of its faith. So, thus, with unprecedented power, science testifies the truth of Pythagorean faith, truth of its belief about God, world, and man. And I do not know more impressive demonstration of truth of any philosophy. Now I'd like to tell about Pythagoreanism. Already I'm going inside Pythagoreanism. As I mentioned, there are 2 main branches inside: deism and theism. No personal God, just mathematical sort of mind, and personal God with whom you can be in contact, to whom you may pray, and so on. Who hears and responds to you. This is theism. And deism, no way. Just author of the laws of nature structured everything. This is deism. I think that deism fails answering the following crucial questions. First, if God does not intervene, how did man receive the divine reason long after creation? You know, humans appeared, thinking beings in this planet appeared, well, less than million years ago, 100,000, I don't know when to start, but, well, let me put million. But the universe exists much longer, it's 13, almost 14 billions. How man received this divine reason long after creation if God does not intervene as a part of belief of deism? Then, while post-quantum mechanical, after quantum mechanics, our vision, God could intervene without breaking any law, what is the rational ground to believe that he does not intervene, does not listen, and does not answer? What is the rational ground? Before, at least, it was that laws of nature, in deterministic worldview, laws of nature determined everything, and, well, to allow God to intervene, you should say that God breaks the laws of nature. After quantum mechanics, it does not appear to be necessary. Also, for us, for humans, how could we intervene and realize our free will? If we can intervene and realize our free will, then why God cannot? Is it reasonable to believe in the that the great architect, just remember citation from Feynman, is it reasonable to believe in the great architect without consciousness? This is, again, essentially the belief of deism. For both deism and theism, the true values are set by the author of everything existing, God. They not agree about nature of God, but who is God? But they share this everything. True values are set by him. What is the value of the cosmic cognition, of scientific cognition, if the creator does not care about that? And deistic God doesn't care about anything. So why we should value cosmic cognition and scientific cognition so much? What is the reason? It seems incompatible. Values of science is incompatible with deistic God who does not care. Why great deists never seriously discussed these problems? I never saw that fathers of science, deists, also like Einstein or Max Planck or Wolfgang Pauli, they discussed these questions. I never saw. Maybe I missed something, but I tried to find any shade of discussion of these questions in articles, essays, diaries of great deists. Nothing. I think that deism is a sort of idealization. Brief question, yes, please, but only brief, not long question after my talk.
I was wondering, as you said that why the great diocese never seriously discussed this. What advantage you see that will provide the discussions to the science of these problems? Advantage to the science. I don't know if I understand.
I'm not sure that I understood you. Sorry.
Because let me see. I have to understand that the great diocese never discusses.
Never discuss these specific
These
questions.
So the science after this great diocese are without the discussion of these problems. In your opinion, if they made these discussions, what advantage would have the science? What other features?
This is the same question which I mentioned. What is the use for science from philosophy? Well, first of all, we should care about my personal position. We should care about cognition. And as great fathers of science, they cared about cognition in general. Apparently, they missed somehow this question. Apparently, there was a blind spot, sort of. They cared about general cognition. They did not put neither Einstein, nor Bohr, nor Heisenberg. None of them put question like Weinberg. What is the use from philosophy to science? They cared about cognition in general. And as a thinkers, they missed this question. Because it was not what the position which is implied in your question. What is the use for science from philosophy? This was not a position of great deists. So I think that the reason why they missed it, because they were blinded by sort of idealization. What sort of absolutization? So I believe a belief in the purely mathematical, atemporal, deistic God is driven by a poorly reflected idealization, absolutization, cult of pure reason. It is cult of pure reason. What happened with them? That's what deism actually is. It is cult of pure reason. Now, to describe maybe better what do I mean by cult of pure reason, I'd like to suggest you some citation, one of my favorite citation about this from Martin Heidegger, from the last paragraph of his article, The Word of Nietzsche, God is Dead, 1943. And this paper ends with this statement. Thinking begins only when we have come to know that reason, glorified for centuries, is the most stiff-necked adversary of thought. This may sound rather paradoxical. Again, that the reason is the most stiff-necked adversary of thought. How is it possible? We used to use these words, reason, thought, as sort of similar, synonyms. And Heidegger is talking exactly opposite. That the reason is the most stiff-necked adversary of thought. And let me remind you also that adversary is one of the synonyms in theological language. And Heidegger, by the way, he was educated as theologian. One of the synonyms of Satan. The adversary is one of the names of Satan or devil. So there is something devilish in reason, according to Heidegger. How it may happen? Why reason could be adversary and the most stiff-necked adversary of thought? Isn't it an absurd statement? Let me try to explain why. It's not absurd. It is very deep observation of real situation in the spirit of time. Already Heidegger belonged to the spirit of time, and it is contemporary spirit of time. Nothing essentially happened since then in this respect. Reason, as it introduced by Greeks, requires discovery of atemporal, transcendental essences behind the veil of phenomena. Forms, or eidosis, logos, reason, atemporal forms, laws of nature, or arithmetics, or geometries, all atemporal forms. They belong to Platonic world of atemporal forms. World comprehended through reason only is essentially atemporal. Everything new only seems to be new. All acts of creation, divine or human, are lost in the kingdom of reason and thus are either denied or proclaimed illusory. The value of thought is lost. Thought, as we know it by our own experience, and as we know thought is essentially temporal. Where thought appears? It appears when we have a lack of understanding. We want to understand something and we do not understand. Then we apply our thought. Thought is starting to work in us, inside of us, in itself, essentially. And then it stops when, okay, we are satisfied with the result. So thought is giving birth to understanding, to new. Thought is essentially, in its core, temporal thing. Temporal. And laws of nature, and this whole Platonic world, is atemporal. Reason is atemporal. Thought is temporal. And this is a big distinction between them. So that is why, when we are sharing the worldview, where thought should be explained in temporal thing, should be explained in terms of atemporal, it's already killed. Thought is killed. Thought becomes illusion, because nothing, according to a temporal Platonic world, nothing essentially appears. All appearance is illusion. Like world lines in physics, right? So world lines, the trajectory already exists. So the value of thought is lost, because thought in its very core is seen as illusion. Therefore, reason, glorified so much, idolized, absolutized, is indeed the very stiff-necked adversary of thought. That's why. So, and that is deism, actually. Deistic position, absolutization of reason. Now, really, if do not tell about 50 or do not tell about 100 years ago, but for contemporary big figures in size, I really do not know even a single deist among big figures. Maybe I just not aware, but I do not know. Probably deism almost vanished. Inconsistency of deism led to its decline. With growing popularity of Darwinism, deism started losing its followers to naturalism, and some of them came, of course, to theism, but I think mostly to naturalism. Naturalism or materialism or reductionism, or there are many, or physicalism, there are many synonyms, I think, essentially for the same stuff. According to naturalism, nature does not have a creator, it is a cause of itself. Thus, who are we then, according to this worldview? There is no principal difference between humans and robots, machines. Humans are robots accidentally emerged due to some machinery and chaos of blind and meaningless material processes. The world itself is most likely a grimace of chaos, or big anthropic principle plus full-blown multiverse is an example how it is predominantly seen now, called chaosogenesis. So that's the picture of being, of the worldview of naturalism. Hence, all our knowledge and theories are mere consequences of these chaotic mechanisms or even a pure chaos. There is no reason to value them except for survival and comfort. But survival and comfort are not the values which generated and empowered fundamental science. Never. Never happened. It's very weak values. Fundamental science was empowered by in Pythagoreanism, where belief in the unity of human mind and divine mind. And divine mind created the world according to its perfect ideas. Numbers has called these ideas Pythagoras, and this is a way of salvation and so on. This is a phase of fundamental science which gave birth to it and nurtured it, and it's not naturalism. It crashes all the values. All the values are just arbitrary statements. There is only one reason to value one value more than another. It's a comfort, and but this is very weak. Or curiosity. Well, curiosity is it's a very weak thing. Even animals are curious, and people could be curious about many different things. Why curiosity about laws of nature should be valued much higher than, say, curiosity about, I don't know, what is the market today. So, no surprise that naturalism, known since Democritus, by the way, it's nothing new about. So it's already in ancient world, naturalism was known very well. Democritus, although I stress that he was not himself naturalist, but he was paradoxical thinker. He formulated naturalism already, and his teacher Leo Kipp probably, they too. It's very old teaching essentially. It's nothing new in naturalism, physicalism, materialism. And it showed its complete infertility in the history of science. Not a single great father of science was naturalist. Not a single one. This is a very important fact. Naturalistic answer to the human question about ourselves, we are robots in a meaningless world, kills any inspiration, which is the primary source of moral, science, art, cognition. Thus, naturalism is an intellectual suicide, destroying all the foundations for cognition, creativity, and a meaningful moral life. Survival and comfort per se are very poor values. No doubt that a community asserting so demoralizing views should not expect a support from society. Widespread naturalism is highly dangerous sickness of the scientific communities and the whole European civilization. For me, it's very clear. It's a sickness. And this sickness is very widespread in scientific community. And we are asking why we have lower budgets, for instance. Why DOE do not pay? I would put question on the vice versa. Why we paid at all? Because mostly science is associated with atheism now. And then atheism is given that sort of values, demoralizing everything, scientific cognition in particular, and general moral life. Why taxpayers should support that sort of destructive teachings, or that communities which associated themselves with that sort of moral destruction? I'm wondering why we are paid at all. I think the taxpayers are very generous and very tolerant, extremely tolerant.
Atheists, probably.
Some of them are atheists, yes. But by the way, in the United States, percentage of atheists among general public, atheists and agnostics together, is very low. It's just 4%. Among scientists, it is 50%. 50%, I just recently saw a statistic. 50% of scientists are atheists and agnostics together. Among general public, it is only 4% together. But among top scientists, percentage of atheists is much higher. Much higher. So, I'm almost done. Again, I'd like to stress that science by itself, with its tremendous success, due to this Pythagorean teaching, which nothing to do with atheism. Atheism claims itself as a scientific worldview. It's lie, as I tried to show. It's lie. So as a fruit of the Pythagorean faith, science shows the truth of its faith. The fruit of Pythagorean faith, so the truth of Pythagoreanism. By value of its faith, fundamental science does respond to a command of the Delphic deity, thus witnessing about the true nature of man, by the way. We may also look at science from this angle. This question of this command of the Delphic deity, know yourself. How science could tell us who we are? By the truth of its faith, through Pythagoreanism, which science is a fruit of. Thus witnessing about the true nature of men, of humans. Expressing its Pythagorean creed by Schroter's formula, I do not see anything better than humans are growing kids of God. This is one of the essences of Pythagoreanism. Maybe I should add here that the world is created by perfect mind. God and humans are growing kids of God. And I think, thank you.
Thank you.
So now, longer questions, statements, disagreements, protests, even compliments are allowed.
Only compliment.
No, no, no. Yes?
Yeah, in the 60th slide,
Which?
the 60.
60?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I am not. I quite disagree with
Uh-huh.
with the statement that naturalisms and the history of science. But as a disclaimer, I don't know if Hume belongs to naturalism through the
David Hume, you mean?
Empirisms. I know that Hume belongs to the empirisms.
David Hume.
David Hume, yeah. And I don't know quite. I am not quite. I don't know if he also belongs to naturalism. But apart of that, um,
He was skeptic in that respect. In general terms, David Hume was skeptic.
so as far as I understand your statement, your expositions, you give a much importance to the reasons, to the thinking, to the logical. So, but and not to the empiricisms, not to the experimental facts.
No. I mentioned briefly importance of experiments. Galileo actually mentioned, and this was a part of new vision for Pythagorean thinking in terms of Galileo. Galileo mentioned that creator was not forced to do world in one or another way. It was his free will. So that is why observations and experiments are extremely important. And this was his disagreement, by the way, with some ancient line of ancient Pythagoreanism. For instance, Plato. Plato considered, and Platonics, ancient Platonics, they considered that essentially everything what is understandable for humans could be understood through perfect reason, pure reason. You do not need to do experiments. So that is why there were few experimenters and physicists in our sense in ancient Greece. Exception is Archimedes, of course, and to certain sense Aristotle. But the dominant line in ancient world was pure reason. And Galileo pointed that it's not correct, because God was not forced to do the world only in this by reason, only in this way. God had free will and he could build one or another world. He had many choices. So to see the true divine mind, we have to make observation, make experiments. This is very strong theological and philosophical point of Galileo, which formed the new science of 17th century. I did not stress that much in my today talk, but I told about this before. So this is called contingent. World is contingent.
Yeah. I was mentioning Hume because his thoughts or his thoughts on causality doesn't the problem of causality. Two events that by a third concept are related, are not purely described by conceptual or logical. You have to explore, you have to be in the world and make these concepts. But even though there is a mix between the experiment and the logical to
May I ask you a question now? May I ask you a question? Do you know any father of science who claimed that he is driven by philosophy of David Hume? Give me a single name of great physicist who told that I am essentially a follower of David Hume. Einstein told that he is a follower of Spinoza, for instance. And many of them associated themselves with Plato or Pythagoras. But do you know a single figure? You don't.
Yeah,
right?
that was my point.
So that's why
Why
skepticism is fruitless.
Yeah.
It's a desert. Philosophy of Hume, from this point of view, which I am trying to follow today, is just nothingness. It's fruitless tree. It's fruitless tree.
Yeah. That's what my point, because how if Hume in these concepts of causality, I mean, that fact is so strong for me that expel Hume from this statement of complete infertility of this history of science related.
He was not a father of science and did not inspire anybody. He is just out. He helped a little bit. I would not cancel his influence at all. With his skepticism, he put some salt and pepper in this dish. And I think criticism also is a good thing. But as a salt and pepper, maybe he helped. But just sideways. Directly, he did not inspire anybody. Although I would not cancel him at all. But he is on the side of Pythagoreanism as a maybe useful controversy. Sometimes you need somebody to be against you, to give you a force. So from this point of view, Hume, for instance, Immanuel Kant told that Hume inspired him, gave him some force. But also Immanuel Kant, nobody mentioned him that among fathers of science that he is inspired by Kantian epistemology. Kantian epistemology, from the point of view of fundamental science, is similar fruitless tree as human epistemology. They're both fruitless. Although they are big figures in philosophy in general, but from the point of view of fundamental science, their influence is rather sort of value of controversy, not directly. Directly it was Plato, Pythagoras, Plato, Aristotle. This is direct line.
So are we going to be always sons of Plato?
Say again?
Are we going to be always sons of Plato, Aristotle? This concept.
That's why I call this phase of fundamental science Pythagoreanism. You may actually go to our website and see my talks, this is already talk number 8. We are actually, as you see, we are recording this and we are putting in our website. This is our website. Let me show you again. This one, Fermi Society of Philosophy, WordPress.com. Go there and listen. My talks were in all detail, starting from ancient time. I describe how science was fed by Pythagoreanism, Platonism.
I think the question was, though, are we bound? Is science always bound to the Pythagorean teaching, or is there a possibility for something else in the future?
Who knows? But so far, fundamental science was bound, and as I show you in my today's talk, Laws of Philosophy, last 60 years apparently it is not, and conclusion of Lee Smolin, which I think very reasonable, in his book of Troubles in Physics, that this loss of philosophy is a sort of sickness, which is tolerable and okay to go in width, but not in depth. And I think it is reasonable.
Somehow there was also a conclusion that said that for different problems there was a need for different approaches. I saw in one slide that the big there was a slide with a lot of words from the book for this guy, physics problem.
Lee Smolin. This one?
Yeah. So it says different styles of research are needed to solve different kinds of
Yes,
problems.
yes,
So
yes.
You're saying that, even though it has been bounded to Platon and Pythagorean approaches, maybe
You may forget about philosophy at all, to go in width, but to go in depth, you need to be philosopher, not only scientist. This is his point.
Yeah.
And situation, here, working out the applications of established frameworks requires very different kinds of thinking and thinkers than inventing those frameworks in the first place. This is the point. However, as I will argue in detail on the pages to come, the lesson of the last 30 years, 40 already, is that the problems we are up against today cannot be solved by this pragmatic way of doing science. And I think it is very clear, because to understand to make a great breakthrough, you should not be too much inside of contemporary science. You should see the broader intellectual and spiritual volume around where science is only part of the human cognition. You must be philosopher, as all fathers of science. All fathers of science were philosophers. They did not ask the question, what is the use of philosophy for science? None of them. It would be stupid for them to ask this question. The question is really very stupid. It actually shows this blindness, absolute philosophical blindness, too much inside of science. And you already do not see what is the use of philosophy. You do not see these great Pythagorean trees. You do not see neither Pythagoras, Plato, ancient Greek mathematicians, Euclid, and others. You do not see Descartes, Leibniz, Newton. Newton wrote much more theological and philosophical papers than physical. Descartes was, first of all, one of the greatest philosophers of 17th century. He was revolutionary in philosophy and in science. He's father of science and father of new philosophy. And having you can essentially wonder, he saw second part of life of revolutionaries of sciences. Einstein maybe he did not saw, but Dirac, he saw Dirac, Heisenberg. These people were very philosophical. And philosophy, again, for them was not just a hobby, by no means. It was a core of their cognition, very center. Science was the application. Philosophy was a core. They were thinkers, first of all. Passionate thinkers. They wanted to know what it is, the world in total, not just scientifically. Fundamentally, the being, to understand the being, the position of man in the entire being. These were their questions. They were philosophers, first of all. And Lee Smolin, by the way, I think correctly characterizes Niels Bohr as a philosopher per se, and then as a part of his application in physics. Physics was sort of application of philosophy to Bohr. Bohr wrote very little formulas, by the way, not that many. He was much more philosopher than physicist. And that is why, by the way, he created such a wonderful atmosphere in Copenhagen. People came and came and came. He was the center of this scientific communication in the revolution of science, Niels Bohr. Because he had a wonderful, fine philosophical feeling. He was a sort of musician in philosophy. By no means he was a sort of scientist per se. Science was, he cared, of course. It was a problem for him, but a problem for core of his philosophical approach to the being. I had citation from Niels Bohr in one of my previous talks. You may go to this website, to our website, and see there.
Alexey, by the way, do you know what Peter Higgs thinks about God?
Not in details. So I would rather keep silence about this because I do not want blah 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 when I do not know exactly. I know that Peter Higgs, just a little things which I know. Peter Higgs expressed his disrespect to atheism of Dawkins. He considered it as just sort of low-value propaganda. Although he himself claims that he is atheist. That's all what I know. How he made compatible, Peter Higgs, his atheism with his belief in beauty in mathematical laws, which of course he shares, otherwise he would not be able to suggest this wonderful theory of his boson. I don't know. Maybe he just in the similar position as Richard Feynman. That's what I suspect. But I tried, by the way, to find sort of his recollection, his reflection on atheism, why he is atheist, how he make it compatible. I did not find. I think it doesn't exist. He never made it public. Maybe similar to Feynman. Maybe he does not. Maybe he, as Feynman, belongs to the generation of people who are already lost philosophy. He's a great scientist who shares the value of Pythagorean, which are fed by Pythagorean tree, but already does not see this tree. Lost this tree from his vision. That's what as Richard Feynman did. That's what I suspect.
So
But
they
I don't
still,
know.
in contemporary science, they still
Huh?
can be successful.
Oh yes,
Science, even without much belief.
of course. And you see,
Numbers.
I'm just mentioning the great figures like
Yeah.
Feynman, Weinberg, and probably Peter Higgs. Of course. Of course. But this does not mean that the observation of Lee Smolin that the deep scientific problems requires broad philosophical view is not correct. It does not mean. And also, there is a sort of inertia. There is a sort of inertia. By the way, the same for moral and different sort of moral and values. The relation between metaphysics and ethics, as I already stressed several times today, but let me do it one time, it is very strong. But there is a sort of inertia. You may lose metaphysical ground for certain ethics, but it doesn't mean that ethics, which is related to this metaphysics, would be immediately lost. Ethics could stay longer, but it does not, but already insecure. And then ethics could fall down again later. Relation between metaphysics and ethics is strong, but there is a sort of retardation in this relation. You may lose metaphysics and still have this wonderful ethics, which is driven by this metaphysics, rooted by this metaphysics. But people already do not share this metaphysics, still share ethics. But it doesn't mean that it could stay forever. No. It could fall down. It will fall down. But maybe it takes a couple of generations. As, for instance, happened with Christian ethics. When Enlightenment started and this Christian metaphysics was lost by Enlightenment, essentially deistic worldviews, it took a general European situation more than a century to give rise to such wonderful fruits as Nazism, communism. And again, I am pointing your attention to the books of Friedrich von Hayek, where he shows how deism and these totalitarian teachings of 20th century are strongly related to each other. His books of Counter-Revolution of Science, The Abuse of Reason, Counter-Revolution of Science, column, The Abuse of Reason. Very interesting treatise how the teachings of end of 18th century, Paris Academy, how it gave rise to Marxism and to Nazism. Much later, it took time. But this is inertia, what I am saying. And Friedrich von Hayek very brilliantly, extremely impressively, in a lot of details, shows you this evolution of mindset in Europe, which gave rise to Nazism and communism. These totalitarian teachings, which essentially were, so destructive. So, and the same with Pythagorean teachings. The same, Pythagorean ethics, as you see in, for instance, in Richard Feynman, he was enthusiastically Pythagorean in his ethics, but he lost metaphysics. And then ethics would be lost. If Pythagoreanism tree will not be seen, maybe I don't know, 1-2 generations, maybe already happens. This laboratory is not going to be supported by people. Why? What is the value? Why Higgs boson has a value? Or other fundamental problems.
Yeah, Alexey, the worst thing, it is not that the lab or such labs will stop to be supported financially. The problem is they still are kept supported, but produce something other than knowledge.
Exactly.
That's the problem of the contemporary science.
Yes. It will be transformed to something else. It will be transformed to something else. To solve, for instance, ecological problems, some technological problems. There are many problems for our planet, except not only fundamental physics. Our planet suffers from a lot of problems unsolved. Why? People should spend their money to support fundamental science. If fundamental science, as many scientists are claiming, is studying sort of random, chaotical formulas. What is the value of chaotical formulas? If our world is going from chaos. It's generated, is just one of the grimaces of chaos. What is the value in that? We're in a big pile of garbage. Happen this little piece of this garbage happened to be habitable. That's why we are here. But that's not why it has a big cosmic value. So this is a point. Ethics and metaphysics are strongly related with each other. Okay? Many thanks for your attention.